Good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Emily Greene. I'm a security and privacy engineer at Moveworks, where I specialize in machine learning security and privacy. For those of you who haven't heard of Moveworks, we're a conversational AI platform for enterprise support. Today, I'll be talking about how we strike the balance of safeguarding data privacy while empowering employees. Moveworks is an AI company, but increasingly, especially with the launch of large language models, most companies have some form of machine learning or AI. And for these large models to exist, you need a lot of data. As XKCD puts it, you pour a ton of data into a big pile of linear algebra. If the answers are wrong, you just stir the pile until they start looking right. Now, our machine learning engineers insist that it is much more complicated than this, but the point is, if the data is sensitive, there's a lot of risk in this process. So how do we think about minimizing human access to sensitive data while still building useful machine learning systems? In this talk, I'll be covering the different roles in the machine learning process and some tools we can use to preserve privacy without affecting productivity. When a model is trained and behaving well, we just let it run. No need to look at the underlying training data, and everything is going well. And then we get a customer complaint. Utterances around deactivating employee access are failing, and we need humans in the loop to understand why. First, the on-call engineer looks into why these utterances are failing. It seems the machine learning model is not recognizing that these are deactivation requests. Next, the data scientist determines how often this happens. There have been 1,000 such requests that have failed in the last 3 months, and some of them are repeated. People are trying multiple times to deactivate via our AI system before having to go another route. So what do? The data annotation team curates new data examples of different ways people might make this request and annotates them, so our machine learning model understands the primary action, deactivation, and the important information around it, whose account we actually need to deactivate. Finally, a machine learning engineer retrains or fine-tunes the machine learning model with these new annotated examples, tests it, and deploys it to production. We're often running again until the next escalation event. Now, not every event necessarily goes through all 4 of these steps, but many require multiple employees, from the on-call engineer to data annotators or data scientists, to be touching the sensitive data. So this is a privacy engineering in practice conference, right? Unfortunately, in practice, while I would love to tell my machine learning team to just collect less data, or use less data, or handle less data, I'd probably get thrown out of the building. We aren't yet in a world where we can easily minimize the data we use or touch for AI. We've made progress. There's few-shot learning, there's synthetic data generation, there's data de-identification, and those are all different techniques that can help minimize the usage of sensitive data. But I don't have enough time today to go into all of those, so I'll be spending some time talking about 2 techniques that are easy to implement anywhere in the machine learning improvement pipeline: data masking and access control. So one mechanism to reduce exposure of sensitive data is data masking. When we need more employees involved in the improvement pipeline, like annotators and engineers, data masking is a great way to reduce potential blast radius. We mask personally identifiable information like names, emails, and phone numbers, as well as potentially sensitive employer information like group names and distribution lists. For most cases, data masking is sufficient because we don't need or want to handle that PII directly. In this deactivation request example, an annotator doesn't actually need to know the name in the request to know what this request is about. They can tell that it's a deactivation request for the person hidden by that PII name token. They don't need to know that that person is Jon Snow. Data masking also does not need to be a one-way operation. Depending on how you implement it, you can allow for an unmask case. So why would we want to allow this? Let's say only some deactivation requests are failing, just those where we've accidentally deleted from the employee roster before issuing this deactivation request. In those cases, the on-call engineer may need to unmask the name field to cross-check whether Jon Snow is still in the employee roster or not. Even in those cases, there's no need to unmask the email or the identifier, so those stay protected. We've also developed our data masking tool to provide PII type-based controls on unmasking, meaning that different controls depending on what the PII type is. We prevent unmasking for the most sensitive types of PII, like social security numbers and credit card numbers, which should never be viewable, and to be honest, should never be entered into our bot. Don't put your social security number into a Slack bot. Like, please, we don't want it. Slack doesn't want it. Like, please don't do it. But sometimes mistakes are made, and employees do that. The other tool we can use is access control. There are two different types of access control that I'll touch on. The first is default role-based access control. So that allows us to eliminate access to the data depending on the role. And that role can start general, all individuals in engineering, and get more specific, like only those that work on the NLU team. This access is structured in a least privileged, least common denominator way. Only the tools that need to be accessed across all engineers, like GitHub, belong in the all engineering policy, whereas more specific machine learning permissions, like Jupyter Hub access, belong in the all ML policy. Additionally, as many of you know, and I have a feeling we'll hear about later today in the LLM section, there are risks to querying machine learning models without guardrails, like grounding or toxicity filters. So we limit who can query these raw machine learning models to only those ML engineers working on their development. So for the language engineers, that would be our NLU team. The other type of access control we have is a break glass mechanism, or access that is only provided to individuals in the cases of emergencies or escalations, like the one we've been talking about. Break glass mechanisms often require an open customer ticket, and at Moveworks, we have two different places where break glass access happens. The first one is allowing unmasked, previously masked data, like I mentioned in the last slide. So that's for those cases where we need that additional context in order to make an informed decision. And the other break glass mechanism is to request time-based access to a specific IAM policy, like the one that allows access to raw customer data. These access requests can only succeed if the requester has the necessary attributes. They're on call, they're assigned to a support ticket, and they're actually staffed to support that specific customer. In those cases, they can request elevated access via our internal bot for a short period of time. All break glass access requests are logged, so we know who requested access to what data at what time and can audit as needed. So bringing it back to those 4 different roles in the machine learning improvement pipeline, how do these different controls get applied? From the on-call engineer, we have access control of who can access our different debugging portals. Everything within those debugging portals are masked, so the utterance, as well as all the associated metadata, like who the requester was, where the requester is based. And then we still have that break glass mechanism allowing for that unmask if needed to get more information about the request. For analytics, data masking's got that question mark because some analytics data you are able to mask, definitely masking any highly sensitive PII like social security numbers and credit card numbers. And you could mask kind of high-level analytics. But the more you mask, the less you can actually analyze about that data. So taking our deactivation request example, there's a big difference analytically in the blast radius if you have 10 deactivation requests failing for 10 different employees, or 10 deactivation requests failing for one employee who's just trying over and over again. So analytics does need to be able to see that raw underlying data to be able to draw conclusions about the data set and present those conclusions back to the customer who wants to see their raw underlying data as well. So here we really lean into access control. We control who can actually hit our analytics different platforms, who can perform different queries on different types of tables, and we restrict who can do joins on different types of data sets. And this is one way that we can ensure that we can separate, for example, personal identifiers from other data, and only break glass mechanism to be able to do that join to actually identify that data. So it goes from being synonymous to identified. On the data annotation side, we only do data annotation on masked data, but we do support that break glass mechanism. It's logged every single time any annotator does unmask to do their job, and their manager will talk to them if they're unmasking everything. So we make sure that, by and large, all that annotation is happening on masked data. And then finally, from the machine learning engineer's perspective, data masking, again, has that question mark, because while I'd love to be able to say that every single model can be trained on masked data, it's just not possible today. Some models have huge performance impacts when you're training them on masked data. So what we do is we first try. We say, hey, can we do this on masked data? What is the impact to the utility of the model? And in the cases that the accuracy impact is too high, we then have an unmasked data to use to train that model. And that's why access control is super important from the ML engineering side. We want to restrict as much as possible who can access that raw training data. So data maxing and access control are not just limited to those few employee use cases at Moveworks that I've covered today. You can apply these tools to many different situations in any case where your employee has a business need to handle sensitive information. So some guiding questions you can ask yourself when determining what to implement are, what data do your employees need? How can access to that data be limited by role? How can your employees operate on masked data? Can we identify what the sensitive data actually is for masking? Do we need a break glass unmasking mechanism? And can we provide time-based access? By answering these questions, you should be able to determine the right mix of data masking and access control to meet your needs. It's no one size fits all. You kind of have to mix and match these two different solutions together to get the least amount of data without having that work impact. So I hope this presentation will help guide decisions in your organization regarding the different tools and techniques that we can use as privacy professionals to protect sensitive data while still allowing the business to operate as needed. Thanks so much.